The gallery door swung open abruptly, glass panels rattling against the frame, and Madeline Clark froze mid-step as the chandelier light fractured across Derek Lawson's smug grin. His hand casually draped over a champagne flute while the crowd murmured behind him, the polished marble floor reflecting the flash of his watch like a tiny sun, and for a moment the room seemed to tilt, the echo of heels clicking against stone louder than the soft jazz playing overhead, and she felt the weight of every gaze as she moved past, shoulders squared, clutching the edge of her tailored black coat, the strap of her leather purse digging slightly into her palm, a memory flashing of Derek laughing at her proposal months before, brushing off her ideas with that same self-satisfied smirk, the echo of his words, "That's cute, Madeline, really cute," still prickling against her skin, and she stepped closer to the display tables, the silver sculpture catching the light just as she noticed Evan Brooks. Across the room, subtly observing, his notebook closed, eyes fixed on her, the corners of his mouth lifting imperceptibly, and Derek's laughter sliced the air again as he leaned toward a colleague, whispering something, and she caught just enough to hear, "She'll never pull it off," and Madeline adjusted her stance, heel tapping once on the floor, a measured response to the challenge, then lifted her chin, letting the ambient light catch the hint of a smile playing at her lips, and a waiter tripped slightly behind her, the soft clatter of glass making Derek glance her way, the tiniest flicker of doubt crossing his face, and she recalled the evening she spent planning exhibitions alone, the smell of varnish and fresh paint mingling with coffee and the quiet hum of the city at dawn, then pivoted toward the sculpture, fingertips brushing the cool metal as she imagined the gallery's next opening under her own name, and Derek's voice came again. "I didn't expect to see you here." Casual, taunting, the subtext slicing through the polished veneer of his charm, and she let a deliberate pause stretch before responding with nothing more than a tilt of her head, eyes narrowing ever so slightly, and a champagne cork popped in the background, startling a nearby guest, the ripple of reaction giving her a fleeting power over the crowded room, and she moved toward a corner, examining the lighting fixture above, the intricate crystal catching refracted rainbows on the floor, a subtle distraction while she recalculated her path, the quiet tap of her watch against her wrist, marking time as strategy, as she finally approached a narrow display of minimalist paintings, fingers tracing the edge of a frame, anchoring herself in the physicality of the moment, and Derek shifted his stance, a subtle move that mirrored his awareness of her presence, the conversation around them continuing but their microcosm now suspended in tension, and the questions in her mind pulsed like the light reflecting from the chandelier. How much had he really noticed? What would be revealed in the next encounter? And could she maintain this poised counter? Every micro-expression and controlled movement a chess piece in the unfolding game of visibility and power. "Wait," Madeline Clark said sharply, her voice slicing through the low murmur of the gallery as she stopped just short of a new abstract sculpture, Derek Lawson glancing over with a raised eyebrow, his smile tightening imperceptibly, and her eyes caught the faint flicker of her phone screen on the marble floor beside her bag, a text from Evan Brooks lighting up. "Did he already see you?" Which made her stomach tighten, the assumption forming instantly that Derek had planned to ambush her here, her mind connecting the dots from the schedule of gallery openings he had posted online to the choice of this exhibit tonight, and she stepped around the pedestal, heels clicking, each tap a beat of decision, and Derek shifted slightly, the glint of his cufflink catching the chandelier light as if marking territory, while she brushed a hand along the sculpture to steady herself, noticing the subtle chip on its corner, a detail that drew her focus and momentarily quieted the inner tension. Yet she felt the pulse of confrontation building. Then Derek said, "You did not expect me?" The words casual but weighted, and Madeline tilted her head, studying the way his watch reflected the soft light, a silent indicator of his attention, and she adjusted her coat, pulling the leather strap of her purse higher to rest firmly on her shoulder, ready to pivot at any shift. Then a server passed, the clatter of a tray scraping briefly breaking the rhythm of the room, Derek's gaze snapping to the sound, and she saw the tiny smirk fade, replaced by a flash of concern, which confirmed her theory that he had underestimated her return, and she took a measured step closer to the center, aligning herself near the canvas Derek had once publicly dismissed as amateur, her fingertips brushing the frame, the cool paint texture grounding her, when suddenly the lighting above flickered, casting jagged shadows that stretched across the polished floor and painted Derek's face in an unsettling way, prompting him to step back, and she seized the moment, voice low but precise. "Do you always choose to make others uncomfortable, or is it a talent?" The Question, a subtle challenge that shifted the atmosphere. Guess, whispers rising, Derek fidgeting, momentarily defensive, the psychological leverage beginning to tilt in her favor. Then her phone buzzed again. Another message from Evan. Stay sharp. Timing matters. Reinforcing her belief that Derek had set this trap intentionally, which solidified her strategy to observe and maneuver before making a decisive move. And just as she pivoted to inspect a metallic sculpture, a sudden clink of dropped silverware echoed from the corner table, drawing attention and creating a brief distraction. Derek's eyes darted, the micro-expression of panic unmistakable, and she noted it quietly, interpreting it as confirmation that he had orchestrated this evening to test her composure, her assumption now nearly absolute, and she adjusted her stance, shifting her weight subtly, heels scraping lightly against marble, preparing for the next step, ready to respond to any provocation. While the ambient chatter swelled, music volume subtly increased, lights reflecting off crystal chandeliers creating a kaleidoscope effect across the floor, forcing Derek to recalibrate. And she caught a glimpse of his hand twitch near the wine glass, the first real sign of his internal shift, the pressure mounting in her mind, prompting her to make a small but calculated move toward the reception desk, keeping Derek within her peripheral vision, the distance between them a tangible tension. And as she reached for a brochure on the counter, a faint laugh echoed from the other end of the room, drawing both their attention, creating a pause, an unspoken challenge, a question lingering in the air. What would be her next action, and would Derek anticipate it? And the moment froze just enough for her to realize she had to act decisively to reclaim control, every micro-decision from posture to gaze now critical, the stakes of perception and power heightened, leaving viewers on edge as the scene closed with the flicker of her phone lighting her hand once more, signaling that the next move would be pivotal. Move, Madeline Clark said under her breath, stepping toward the reception desk as Derek Lawson's gaze snapped to her, the marble floor glinting under the chandelier light as his posture stiffened, and her phone buzzed in her coat pocket, the screen illuminating a message from Evan Brooks. He is watching closely, stay alert, which confirmed her belief that Derek had planned every step, and she adjusted the strap of her purse, fingertips brushing the cold leather as she pivoted to intercept the path she assumed he intended to block her, a slight tremor in the floor beneath her heels marking the cadence of her decision, the ambient music momentarily swelling, distracting nearby guests and giving her a microsecond advantage. Then a soft clatter from a dropped brochure behind her drew Derek's attention, a subtle hesitation in his movement, and she seized the moment to glance at the wine glass in his hand, noticing the condensation forming, the smallest detail making her infer he had just been drinking despite earlier claims, which reinforced her assumption that he was attempting to maintain composure under pressure. And she stepped closer, heel tapping once, and Derek leaned toward a waiter, murmuring something, his eyes flicking to her and a brief frown crossing his forehead, power subtly shifting, and she noticed the corner of a metallic sculpture slightly bent, evidence of the earlier rush of guests, a detail she interpreted as a sign that this venue was less controlled than Derek wanted everyone to believe, and she made a small decision to alter her route, adjusting her path along a wall lined with framed abstract pieces, fingertips lightly tracing the edge of a frame to maintain balance, when suddenly a server tripped behind her, the clinking of glass drawing gasps. Derek's gaze snapping again, the slightest flush of surprise on his cheek, and she whispered, "Careful," her tone carrying undercurrent of accusation, which made him momentarily pause, a micro-power shift, and she felt her prior belief that she could predict his every move begin to waver as his reactions became less predictable. Then she shifted her weight, eyes scanning for an exit or a subtle opening to assert herself, when a faint chime from her phone indicated a new email, the subject line only partially visible. Evan confirms tonight, adding to her assumption that Derek's display was a test she had to respond to immediately, and she decided to approach a small sculpture on a pedestal, leaning slightly to examine its detail, when the lighting above flickered briefly, casting long angular shadows across the floor and onto Derek's face, the unexpected change making her flinch and forcing her to readjust her stance, the interruption creating an unspoken pause, Derek's eyes narrowing, his lips tightening, and she realized she had to act, each motion deliberate as she stepped toward the reception table, brushing against the edge, a small stack of brochures shifting slightly, and she caught Derek's eyes follow every movement, the tension thickening, creating the scenario where she had to decide whether to confront or retreat, the hallway beyond the gallery momentarily darkening as an outside light shifted, a gust of cool air brushing against her neck, amplifying the uncertainty, and she whispered under her breath, "Not yet," acknowledging the need for patience but also feeling the pressure mounting, the marble echoing under her shoes, the clinking of a nearby glass providing a rhythmic counterpoint, Derek adjusting his stance subtly, weight shifting, and Madeline felt the thin line between control and exposure, as her prior assumptions about his intentions began to strain, her strategy evolving mid-step, leaving the scene poised on the edge of collision, every decision increasing the stakes, and the moment closing with the faint glow of her phone in her hand, signaling that the next move would dictate whether she could maintain composure or be caught off guard. "Do not move," Madeline Clark said sharply, pivoting toward the open hallway as Derek Lawson took a step closer, his shadow stretching across the polished marble floor, the chandelier above casting fractured light that glimmered against the edges of nearby sculptures, and the unexpected sound of a camera shutter clicking from the corner made both of them turn, the photographer's flash briefly illuminating Evan Brooks standing silently, holding a folder under his arm, the detail sending a jolt through Madeline as she assumed Derek had orchestrated this setup to expose her presence, and she adjusted her purse strap, the leather stiff under her fingers, stepping to block the path toward the exit, heels tapping rhythmically, each step a deliberate assertion of control. Then Derek's hand brushed against the edge of a display table, sending a stack of pamphlets fluttering to the floor with a soft clatter, drawing gasps from nearby guests, and Madeline bent slightly to pick up the top pamphlet, noticing the subtle note scrawled on it, a message she interpreted as proof that Derek had prearranged her appearance, reinforcing her assumption that tonight was a test she had to navigate. She looked up to see his eyes flicking nervously toward the spilled pamphlets, and she realized the imbalance of power had shifted slightly, prompting her to step closer, tilting her head as if examining the brochure, while her phone buzzed with a new text from Evan. "Do not underestimate him," the timing reinforcing her belief that every movement was being watched. Then the gallery lights flickered, shadows leaping across the floor and the walls, briefly distorting the sculptures, and Derek stumbled back a fraction, the micro-expression caught by her peripheral vision, confirming her suspicion that he was reacting to her influence, and she straightened, brushing the brochure against her coat, and when she moved toward a narrow passage between two large paintings, a guest's dropped wine glass clinked sharply, making both Derek and her flinch, his hand tightening around the stem of his glass, and she whispered under her breath, "Not accidental," the conviction in her tone shifting the micro-power. And she pivoted quickly to block the path again, the subtle shift of her weight pressing her advantage, then noticed a small envelope on the pedestal, the handwriting faint but legible, "Madeline," a new detail that made her heart beat faster, appearing as confirmation that Derek's intentions were deliberate, her prior belief solidifying even as a nagging doubt tickled the edge of her mind. Then the soft hum of the air conditioning changed, causing a sudden draft that fluttered the brochure in her hand, a reminder that even small forces could disrupt her plan, and she glanced at Derek, noting the tension in his jaw, his eyes scanning the room as if calculating her next move, and she stepped back slightly, adjusting her posture, every micro-movement measured to provoke minimal reaction. Then the unexpected creak of a floorboard behind the reception desk made her spin, the angle revealing Evan stepping into the light briefly, the sight unsettling her assumption that Derek had total control, her strategy now needing recalibration, and as she bent to pick up a fallen brochure, her elbow caught the corner of the pedestal, the soft scrape echoing, and she realized instantly that the attention was on her, forcing a split-second decision, retreat and maintain composure or advance and risk exposure, the weight of the choice pressing as Derek's gaze followed every motion, leaving her frozen momentarily, the gallery alive with the sounds of subtle shifts, and the scene closing with the flicker of Evan's folder reflecting chandelier light, a visual jolt hinting that the next action would unravel the assumptions she had relied on, creating suspense and an immediate need for decisive movement. "I need to see this," Madeline Clark whispered, stepping toward the far corner of the gallery where a tall sculpture cast a jagged shadow on the marble floor, the polished surface reflecting shards of chandelier light, and she crouched slightly to examine a faint smudge on the base, brushing it lightly with her finger, revealing a tiny handwritten note that read, "Tonight counts," the detail making her pulse quicken and solidifying her belief that Derek Lawson had planned this meticulously. And she scanned the room, noticing the slight tilt of a framed painting nearby, the edge catching the light in a way that suggested a rush of movement, confirming in her mind that Derek had been there moments before, yet the absence of any footprints near the note contradicted that assumption, introducing doubt that she had to resolve immediately, and she stepped back, adjusting her coat, fingers brushing the smooth leather strap of her purse, as Derek's voice broke the quiet. "Looking for something specific?" His tone casual but loaded, prompting her to pivot quickly, heels clicking sharply, the sound echoing off the marble, and she caught the micro-expression of surprise in his eyes, a hint of the meticulous control she had assumed he had beginning to crack. Then a server dropped a tray behind her with a clatter, glassware tipping slightly, drawing a collective murmur from the crowd, and she bent slightly to steady a fallen goblet, her action providing the perfect opportunity to intercept Derek's movement toward the exhibit exit, and as she stood upright, her phone buzzed in her pocket with a message from Evan Brooks. "Do not trust appearances tonight," reinforcing her growing suspicion that Derek's maneuvers were designed to provoke a reaction, and she tilted her head, noticing a faint glint on the corner of the pedestal, a small sticker partially peeling, which she interpreted as an additional marker of control, the combination of details prompting her to step closer to the pedestal, leaning slightly, fingertips brushing the metal surface, feeling the vibration of footsteps from approaching guests, and she whispered, "Is this part of the plan?" A rhetorical question that shifted Derek's stance subtly, his hand tightening around his glass, and she took a deliberate step forward, adjusting her angle to block his path, when suddenly a soft click from a door behind the sculpture startled both of them, the unexpected sound drawing Derek's gaze away for a fraction of a second, a microshift that gave her a narrow advantage, and she seized the moment to glance at the nearby display of brochures, noting one folded oddly with a partially visible name, Madeline, reinforcing her belief that every detail was orchestrated, and she acted instinctively, moving to retrieve it, only to find her elbow knocking against the pedestal, the soft scrape echoing in the gallery, catching Derek's attention, his eyes narrowing, and she realized her impulsive move had revealed her position, escalating the tension. Forcing a rapid decision to either retreat or maintain forward pressure, she chose to advance, sliding the brochure into her coat pocket, posture upright, eyes fixed on Derek, and as she took another step, a faint metallic clang echoed, Derek stepping back slightly to adjust, the sudden auditory cue heightening the stakes, while her mind raced, interpreting every gesture, shadow, and reflection, and she caught a flash of movement across the room, Evan briefly appearing in the periphery, the image unsettling her prior assumptions about control, and the scene froze in a heartbeat of uncertainty, power shifting subtly toward Madeline yet leaving an open question hanging. Would Derek counteract now, and what had Evan truly intended, leaving her poised on the edge of reaction as the gallery lights shimmered above, casting long, angular shadows that stretched toward her, signaling that the next move would demand immediate, decisive action. "Stay here," Madeline Clark said, stepping quickly toward the pedestal as Derek Lawson's eyes followed her every move, the clink of the brochure she had pocketed from the last exhibit echoing softly against the marble floor, and she bent slightly to adjust the base of a sculpture, noticing a tiny scratch that she assumed had been made deliberately, a detail reinforcing her belief that Derek was orchestrating this moment. Then a sudden flicker of the gallery lights sent long angular shadows across the room, stretching Derek's figure in a way that made her start, the unexpected movement forcing her to shift her weight, the heels scraping slightly as she took a step backward to recalibrate, and her phone buzzed against her coat, Evan Brooks' message illuminating the screen. "Watch the reflection," prompting her to glance at the mirrored wall where she caught Derek adjusting his stance, an observation that seemed to confirm her assumption that he was preparing to block her exit. She straightened, brushing her fingers along the metal surface of the sculpture for leverage, and as she pivoted to the left, a soft crash from a fallen vase near the reception startled both of them, power subtly tilting in her favor, and she whispered, "Careful," the subtext sharp enough to register as a warning, then stepped toward a narrow corridor, the polished floor catching the light in streaks that made every motion visible, and she noticed a small envelope half hidden under a bench, the handwriting smudged but familiar, Madeline, reinforcing her belief that Derek had staged the sequence deliberately. She reached to pick it up, only to find it empty, the sudden void unraveling her assumption and introducing a jolt of uncertainty. Then Derek moved, placing himself subtly in her line of sight, his watch catching the chandelier light, micro-gesture of control reasserting itself, and she decided quickly to step around him, brushing the edge of the bench for support, but a soft thud of a dropped wine glass behind her made her freeze momentarily, the sound carrying through the room, drawing gasps, Derek's lips tightening, a subtle sign of tension, and she realized her impulsive advance had revealed too much, forcing a rapid choice. Press forward or retreat, she chose to advance, adjusting the brochure in her pocket, sliding her coat slightly to hide it, and in the movement a corner of a painting shifted, the frame scraping the wall. Derek flinched, the reaction reinforcing her belief that she could manipulate the next moment. Yet as she stepped closer to the mirrored wall to track his reflection, a faint gust from an open window blew her hair across her face, obscuring her vision and causing her to misjudge the distance, leading her to bump lightly against a pedestal, the sculpture wobbling slightly, and Derek's sharp glance caught the error, a power shift, his eyes narrowing as he realized she had made a misstep, the gallery's hum punctuated by the subtle echo of the shifting piece, raising stakes as she felt the risk climb, her assumption of control now faltering, and she pivoted to steady the sculpture, fingertips brushing the cold metal, glancing at Derek, who mirrored her movement, tension coiling, and the scene closed with the soft jingle of a phone in her pocket, Evan's message briefly illuminating, hinting that another unexpected variable had entered play, leaving her with the urgent need to decide her next action under heightened pressure. "Do not move," Madeline Clark whispered, stepping around the pedestal as the faint hum of the gallery lights shifted, a subtle change that made the shadows stretch differently across Derek Lawson's face, his eyes narrowing at the movement, and she bent slightly to examine a small label at the base of a sculpture, the name partially visible, Evan Brooks, a detail she had not expected, causing a jolt through her prior assumptions about the night's orchestration, and she straightened, brushing her fingers against the cold metal, noticing the tiny dent along its edge, interpreting it as a marker that someone else had been there recently, her prior belief that Derek controlled every detail faltering slightly, and she pivoted toward the mirrored wall, catching the reflection of Derek adjusting his cufflinks nervously, the subtle shift signaling a crack in his confidence, and she took a deliberate step forward, the heels clicking softly, brushing past a corner table where a glass teetered precariously, the clink as it steadied confirming she had been noticed, and Derek said, "Looking for something?" The words calm but loaded, and she tilted her head, observing the slight twitch in his jaw, the detail challenging her assumption of total control. Then she reached for a brochure half hidden under the pedestal, fingers brushing the paper. A small note slipped inside reading "Tonight changes everything," reinforcing part of her strategy but creating a new layer of uncertainty, and she shifted her weight, glancing over her shoulder at Evan standing silently by the far display, the soft reflection of his watch catching the chandelier light, a detail she read as subtle approval, prompting her to move closer, stepping around the edge of a painting, the polished floor echoing each click, and a sudden gust from the slightly open window fluttered a nearby curtain, drawing Derek's gaze and forcing a micro-reaction, his hand brushing the stem of his wine glass, the tension coiling, and she bent slightly to retrieve a fallen pamphlet, brushing against the pedestal, the scrape audible, drawing the attention of nearby guests, creating a fleeting moment where both Derek and Madeline froze, eyes locking, the power shifting incrementally. Then she stepped back, repositioning the brochure in her coat, noticing a small envelope tucked in the corner with a familiar handwriting, "Madeline," another confirmation of intentional setup, yet opening it revealed only a blank card, and a soft clatter from a dropped fork in the distance made both startle, her heartbeat quickening, the assumption of perfect orchestration from Derek beginning to feel incomplete. She leaned slightly toward the mirrored wall, reading Derek's reflection, eyes catching the hint of a frown, power subtly tilting in her favor, and she whispered under her breath, "Not everything is as it seems," stepping toward the corridor, brushing past a sculpture, the metal cold against her fingertips, when a sudden flash from a camera caught her attention, Evan adjusting a lens, light scattering across the marble, and the jolt of realization hit her. Someone else had been manipulating the scene, her previous assumptions faltering, forcing her to pivot quickly to intercept Derek's movement, the heels scraping the floor, creating a rhythmic tension, and as she reached the corner, a soft click echoed, the door shifting slightly as if someone was entering unseen, the gallery lights flickering again, and she paused, power suspended in the air, the next move entirely uncertain, the scene ending with her fingers brushing the pedestal, breath held, the reflection of Evan's watch gleaming as the question of who truly controlled the night hung palpable, demanding immediate response. "Not another step," Madeline Clark said, her voice low but firm, pivoting toward the mirrored corridor as Derek Lawson's eyes flicked toward her, the marble floor reflecting the soft chandelier light, and she noticed a faint shimmer on the pedestal across from her, a thin envelope partially concealed beneath a sculpture, the handwriting elegant and deliberate, "For you," the detail making her pulse quicken as she assumed it confirmed Derek's intent to control every aspect of the evening, and she stepped toward it, heels clicking sharply, brushing past the corner of a painting, when a soft click of a door opening echoed, drawing both of them to glance, Evan Brooks appearing briefly in the reflection of the mirror, the glow from his watch catching the chandelier light, lending him an aura of quiet authority, and she interpreted it as reassurance, a subtle shift of power, prompting her to reach for the envelope, only to find Derek subtly adjust his position, the cufflink catching the light signaling his awareness of her move, and she hesitated, fingertips brushing the paper, then pivoted, tilting her head as he whispered, "Careful where you step." His tone calm but carrying weight, the soft subtext suggesting more than caution, and she stepped decisively, sliding the envelope into her coat pocket, brushing against the marble pedestal, the scrape audible in the hushed gallery, the movement causing a ripple among nearby guests, a microshock of attention that made Derek glance momentarily to the side, and she caught the slight tightening of his jaw, power subtly tilting toward her, and she leaned slightly toward the mirrored wall, tracking the reflection of Derek's movements, noting the twitch of his hand near the wine glass, a subtle but clear indicator of internal recalibration. Then a faint rustle of fabric behind her drew her gaze, a guest adjusting a draped curtain, the motion creating a shifting shadow that obscured Evan briefly, causing a pulse of uncertainty, and she adjusted her stance, fingertips grazing the cool metal of the sculpture for balance, and whispered under her breath, "Not all is revealed yet," then stepped closer to intercept Derek's path to the exit, the polished floor echoing each tap of her heel, as a soft clatter from a tray being set on a side table startled both men, and Derek's eyes flicked sharply, the micro-expression caught in the chandelier reflection, indicating recalculated attention, and she seized the moment to step to the mirrored corridor, brushing past the edge of a painting, fingertips grazing the frame, noticing a small scratch that had not been there before, a subtle detail suggesting another layer of manipulation, and she pivoted to place her hand lightly on Evan's shoulder as he stepped fully into view, his presence calm but commanding, lending her an unspoken shield, the juxtaposition making Derek hesitate for a brief heartbeat, power shifting almost imperceptibly, and she whispered, "I choose this path," sliding past him, the heels scraping sharply, the sound reverberating, the guest's murmur swelling, and a soft chime of her phone reminded her of a new message from Evan. Timing is everything, reinforcing her calculated advance, and as she stepped fully into the open gallery, the reflection of chandeliers on the polished floor caught her eye, revealing Derek's startled glance toward a corner she had not considered, the angle of reflection exposing a detail previously hidden, an unexpected twist that shifted her perception once again, forcing her to recalibrate instantly, the tension coiling tightly in the air, leaving her poised between exposure and assertion, the scene ending with the envelope warm in her coat pocket, Evan's presence at her side, and the glimmer of a reflection across the room, hinting that the next decisive action would confront every hidden variable in the evening. "This ends now," Madeline Clark said, stepping into the center of the gallery, heels clicking sharply on the polished marble, the chandelier light fracturing across the metallic sculptures as Derek Lawson's eyes met hers, tension crackling in the space between them, and she reached for the envelope in her coat, unfolding the paper to reveal a note that read, "The choice is yours," the subtle clue shifting her understanding, the realization that Derek had not been orchestrating every detail alone, and she pivoted slightly, brushing past a pedestal, fingertips grazing the cold metal, hearing the soft scrape echo, and Evan Brooks appeared beside her, the polished shine of his watch catching the chandelier light, his presence calm, silent affirmation of support without intervention, and she adjusted her posture, tilting her chin as Derek's lips tightened, the power subtly tilting toward her. She stepped forward, voice low, "I decide." Brushing past the edge of a painting, the polished floor reflecting each measured move, and Derek's hand twitched toward his wine glass, the micro-movement betraying surprise, then a soft clink of a dropped brochure nearby drew the attention of guests, amplifying the tension, and she bent slightly to retrieve it, fingers brushing the smooth paper, noticing a small embossed emblem she had not seen before, suggesting additional oversight she had not anticipated, and she straightened, slipping the brochure into her coat, heels scraping lightly as she pivoted, eyes scanning Derek's reflection in the mirror, noting the subtle change in his expression, the tight line of his jaw softening, a silent acknowledgement of her authority in this moment, and she whispered, "I move forward." Stepping past the mirrored corridor, fingertips trailing along the cool metal of a sculpture, then the soft shuffle of Evan's shoe on the marble behind her punctuated the silence, a quiet but powerful reinforcement, the gallery lights flickering briefly, elongating shadows across the floor, and she noticed a faint reflection of a third figure near the doorway, a subtle shift she had not accounted for, momentarily rattling her assumption of control, and she pivoted sharply, taking a careful step, brushing against the pedestal, the scrape audible Derek's eyes narrowing, a subtle microshift of power, and she caught a glimpse of a small